Okay, moving on to the most exciting item of the evening. We have item 7B. This is a request for a motion to adopt the proposed oil and gas ordinance. I need a motion.
For the purpose of discussion, motion to adopt.
Do we have a second? Motion to adopt without a second. Motion fails. End of conversation. Moving on to comments from commissioners. Any comments from commissioners?
Good evening.
Wait, comments from commissioners? I have a few comments. Any comments from commissioners? All right, I have comments. I'm sorry. There was a motion on the table that was not seconded. The issue dies. The motion on the table was a motion to adopt. There was no second. Under Robert's rules, there's no action. Now we have time for comments from the commissioners, which is the next item on the agenda.
We just haven't been able to hear well for the whole meeting so far. That's the point.
Well, we'll try and be sure that you hear the next few comments. So I'd like to make a couple of comments with regard to the ordinance that had no second. So it's interesting the variety of comments that I've received from all different perspectives on this issue, from the oil and gas industry, from our tribal organizations, from environmentalists. So there are many that are opposed to this ordinance, and though its objective is to protect our water and our environment, I'm surprised as to how many people who have commented don't seem to understand this. I'm also surprised about the number of people who think we can rush to renewables with little consideration for the fact that the oil and gas industry provides 30% or more of the tax revenues for the state, revenues that support our schools and other social services. And they seem not to be aware that much of the renewables require subsidies. So how do we move from a fuel source that provides funding for much of our government to a power source that we must subsidize? Where do the funds come from? I'm impressed by the amount of citizen commitment to our county, our community. So many of our citizens have put a lot of volunteer effort into developing ordinances and educating many of us on the hydrology, the geology, the oil and gas technology, air quality, and protection of historical and cultural resources. I've personally learned much about our county, the economic impact, the geology, the tribal perspective of protecting our lands. Namoga complains that they weren't involved. Actually, there were several requests of them to participate, but they refused. I had a personal conversation with Ryan Flynn on this issue. He was also invited by the Citizens Working Group to participate, but chose not to. And in doing so, denigrated those citizens that were working on this issue. However, Namoga makes some interesting points with regard to the ordinance that's on the table, such as definitions that should be consistent with OECD definitions. Apparently they aren't. They point out that there are multiple existing agencies that have and already performing monitoring of compliance issues. They point out duplication of reporting and how potentially arbitrary the director's authority is described in the proposed ordinance. On the other hand, our Pueblo and tribal interests have concerns about the impact of the oil and gas on their lands, water and air quality, and on cultural and religious resources. They point to terminology that should be consistent throughout the ordinance. They would like to see more than just a notice, but an opportunity to respond, and then a response from the county regarding their response. That seems reasonable. They would like to see more involvement from their tribal preservation officers. They would like to see the recognized standards for air quality and water being considered as part of the oil and gas application approval process, and greater setbacks for tribal lands. Others have pointed out inconsistencies from one article of an ordinance to another. For example, the number of calendar days in one article is 30 and in another is 40. I think this ordinance needs more work. If this ordinance is voted down, which apparently it has because there's no motion to move forward on it, it leaves the current comprehensive zoning ordinance would prevail. That means any applications for oil and gas extraction would be processed as a special use, a process in which any company can apply and go through the public hearing process seeking approval of a permit. Who knows? Maybe we'd be better off seeing whether there really are any applicants. At any time during these past few years, any oil and gas company could have applied for a permit under the current existing comprehensive zoning ordinance, yet they haven't. Sort of makes one wonder why we're even going through this effort. So rather than continue this process of dealing with what-ifs and hypotheticals, maybe it seems to me that if there are going to be lawsuits, they ought to be about real cases, not about conjecture. So it's with some trepidation that I didn't move to as a second, or that I probably would have voted no on the ordinance. Any other comments from commissioners? Oh wait, I have one other comment, and it has to do with the comic book. I'm especially angry about this comic book. The reason I'm angry is my picture isn't in it.
Hang around.
Commissioners, any other comments?
I have a couple. First of all, a lot of time and effort has gone into going nowhere from a lot of people, and it's kind of sad to see that. But you know, as a commission, I think that the commission took it upon themselves to do what the people wanted. They first of all, they waited for the New Mexico Tech study. It was brought up extensively. We need to wait. We did wait. We created a citizens working group. That in itself turned into somewhat of a mess. Instead of one group, there's two groups. And they couldn't get along. And so consequently, this is where we're at. I think it's now it's incumbent upon the state and possibly the legislature to do something about the oil and gas industry, and how they regulate it. I just saw an article from Aubrey Dunn, who is a Republican turned Libertarian, saying how much the oil industry is doing wrong in southern New Mexico and in northwest New Mexico, going through roads, not taking care of the environment as they're supposed to, and that's public comment coming from our public land commissioner. So I hope that that the legislature looks into that, and if we need to revisit this at a later time, I hope that that we do it, and we do it better than what we've done it so far. Thank you.
Other comments from commissioners? I guess then I have one last comment, and it's understanding that this now reverts to the special use process under the comprehensive zoning ordinance. I would recommend to staff that they use the learnings that we've had over the past several years, including the text from the considered
Mr. Chairman,
ordinance.
I think you have to speak into the mic, because when you keep
I'm
turning
sorry.
away, people can't hear you.
I'll start over then. I would suggest that because this now reverts to special use, that the planning and zoning staff use the learnings that we've had over the past several years, including the text from considered ordinances, to document some guidelines for the oil and gas applications that may follow, if in fact there are any, and for the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider when considering approval of a permit to an application. Any other comments? With that said, then the next item on the agenda is item 9, which is adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Stand adjourned.